What I remember vividly about that morning was being in my office, which then was separate from our ministry center on Capitol Hill. It was actually across the Potomac River in Northern Virginia. And the ministry center, which we had just recently purchased and opened, was undergoing some interior renovation. And my daughter was living there. She had just graduated college the previous May and was working for a pro-life group in Washington. And she had her cousin staying with her in the living quarters of the building. And I was in my office. It was the start of a routine day, and my secretary burst in. She was obviously distressed, and she said, something terrible has happened in New York City. A plane has crashed into one of the trade towers. And we brought it up on the internet. We started watching and incredibly saw the second plane hit the second tower. Simultaneously, they were reporting that there were two other hijacked planes inbound towards Washington. And then seconds later, one of them crashed into the Pentagon. At that point, we knew, and all the reporters were saying, that this was not an accident. This was a deliberate attack. And I knew at that point, Washington, D.C. had to be a target. I called my daughter and I said, honey, don't ask any questions. Just get in your car, take your cousin, and drive east out of the city. And she was frustrated because she knew something was happening. She didn't have any details. We had very little. And she said, but Dad, and I finally got angry. I said, honey, stop butting. No buts. Get in the car and drive east. And she said, but Dad, what direction is east? Oh, I felt so badly. But I knew she couldn't take the regular routes out of the city, that they would close off the bridges for security reasons. And in fact, they were closing the streets behind her. I eventually talked her out, and she got out of the city with her cousin. And Congress was evacuated, and of course, Capitol Hill was in lockdown for days. And I can just remember the sorrow, the fear, the terrible sense of loss of those days. But only a couple of days following, I took a procession of ministers from every Christian denomination to the site of the Pentagon crash and led a prayer service there. I can remember the charred cavity in the building in the shape of an airplane. They were still pulling bodies out. It was still smoking. The lamp posts in the nearby parking lot had been sheared off by and then as soon as they started train service again to New York, I went to New York to find some friends we hadn't heard from, some supporters of our ministry, and a pastor colleague friend whose church and home were in the shadow of the trade towers. I hadn't heard anything from him. We found everybody. They were alive and well, and Pastor Kirk Vanderswaff from the neighborhood church in Manhattan and I went down to Ground Zero and volunteered as chaplains. We served as relief chaplains for firefighters and police personnel who were being dropped down in buckets into this burning inferno, the main hole that was created with the collapse of the towers. And I remember them dropping down, and it was as if they were being dropped into a Dantean abyss, into hell itself. And my own police escort, the man who was guiding me there, said, Parson, look at your shoes. And of course they were just coated with dust, with a gray film. And he said, my buddies are in that dust. My buddies are on your shoes. I'll never forget that.